I think we're live. Amazing. Welcome to another session of Covalent's Office Hours. And today we have a very special guest, Connor, from the Avalanche team. Connor, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. An early start to the day. We were up at 6 a.m. for a call with our community. And it's just past 9 a.m. for us here. Amazing. Okay, so let's get started. Tell us a little bit about your background and specifically your at Avalabs.
Sure. So I've been in the blockchain space for a number of years now. I got started back in college in 2014, I think, working on Bitcoin and building one of the first apps that was using Bitcoin for proof of attestation. And that was a really, really cool project that I really enjoyed and kind of got me hooked on Bitcoin, hooked on blockchain. And I was really excited about it back then. And then when I was graduating, I was looking for work. And in 2016, I was kind of looking around and wondering, what's going to be around for the next 5 years. And I was kind of like looking at all the blockchain companies. I couldn't really find one that I was in love with at the time. And so I ended up going to work for the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab to do cybersecurity research for 4 years. And I was able to do some blockchain work while I was there and kind of bring over my expertise and kind of work in a defense cybersecurity industry and look at blockchain from that perspective. And then a few months ago, I was kind of looking around. I kept tabs on Avalanche and everything that's gone around with it. And around the time that mainnet was going live, I just kind of realized that this was a super exciting opportunity for a project that really doing something different in the space. And so I wanted to join in. And so I've been at the company for about 6 months now. And I work there building smart contract applications. So like I said, I started on Bitcoin, and then when I had my time at Johns Hopkins, I was able to work on Ethereum, and so now I'm building exclusively on Avalanche. And so as part of that, I developed and launched the Pangolin DEX exchange on Avalanche, which is one of our really big dApps and has been our biggest dApp to date. And now I spend my days improving Pangolin, working on some new dApps, as well as helping other developers learn to build on Avalanche and get their projects off the ground. And so it's a really exciting place to be. So I get to be at the cutting edge with all the degens, trying to build the latest and greatest yield farming opportunities and working with tons of really amazing developers who are just interested in using all the capabilities of these new platforms to build dApps that aren't possible anywhere else. And it's a really exciting place to be.
Amazing. So when did you pick up Solidity and writing smart contracts? Was that at Avalabs or did you have prior experience? When was that switch over?
I don't remember the exact year. So I started my work in Solidity at Johns Hopkins, and I was working on a prototype. I think it must have been late 2016, early 2017. It was pretty early in the life of Ethereum. And trying to develop, I was working on a name service at the time, precursor to ENS. And so I started then, and it has come a very long way since then. I didn't develop, I haven't been working on projects constantly since then, but every 6 months or a year, I'd kind of pop back in and look at it and say, oh, wow, things have changed a lot. And I would say, now is the best time ever to learn Solidity because the tools have come such a long way, and it's actually a real experience that you can have some success with now without some of the headaches. There's still a lot of headaches, I have to say, but I think a hard hat in particular is a company with a product that is doing really incredible stuff. I know Tenderly is adding a lot of really great developer tools and just with all the metrics and stuff that you guys produce, interacting with the blockchain and putting your own smart contracts up there is easier than it has ever been.
Yeah, it's definitely. So we've been in the space for 3.5 years. And when we started out, of course, there was no Covalent. There was no product like Covalent to pull out blockchain data. So it's taken us a couple of years and maybe half a dozen architectural revisions before we were able to hit scale. So it's very impressive to see how far the space has come. And I think the timing is just right for the bull market and all of the financial side to pick back up. Amazing. Okay, so let's go into the specifics. What are you most excited about? One, Avalabs. What is Avalabs working on that you're very excited about? And two, about the space in general.
Mm-hmm. I think these two answers are very similar. I think we're at a point where a lot of people are really frustrated with Ethereum and frustrated with Bitcoin and their lack of scalability. And at the same time as that frustration with high fees and just slow transactions, we're seeing all kinds of innovation on the altcoin side, on these new platforms like Avalabs that are being stood up, and actually having breakthroughs in scalability so that it will be possible to bring a fast, low-fee, decentralized ecosystem to the masses and have it work at scale. And I think just having all of these new platforms spring up with the scalability is incredibly exciting. And the ability not just to say, oh, okay, well, this new platform, it's better than the old form, so let's migrate everything over to the new platform. Instead, what we're seeing is a cross-chain ecosystem spring up where you can have Ethereum and Avalanche be friends because there's a place for both of us in the marketplace. And we can have bridges to Binance, we can have bridges to Solana or Phantom or any of these other chains. And we can actually take advantage of all of the good pieces of all of them. And it doesn't have to be a winner-take-all solution. But we can have this cross-chain ecosystem where there can be pros and cons to every choice, and they can all be interoperable. And I think we've just had such breakthroughs in that area, and really great bridging products that are really letting us work together rather than as competition necessarily. I think that's really great, and that's one of the things about Avalanche in particular that gets me really excited is the concept of subnets. So for those who don't know, Avalanche is it's a network of networks, or a blockchain of blockchains. And so what really makes Avalanche different from a fundamental perspective is that we have a revolutionary new consensus algorithm that allows us to process thousands of transactions per second without actually sacrificing decentralization, and being able to do that for low cost. And so we wanted to take our consensus technology and apply it to as many of these chains as possible. Basically, we created a system where you can use our consensus and launch your own blockchain on Avalanche. And so we can have multiple blockchains sit side by side and have different validator sets and different rules for what constitutes a transaction. So right now we have three chains. We have our X chain, our P chain, and our C chain. One's for staking, one is for UTXO-based transactions, and the other is for smart contract interactions. And so in the future, we're hoping to have many different blockchains running on our network, or different virtual machines. And so, for instance, one thing that is really exciting to me is we're working with some external developers to build a Bitcoin-based blockchain on the Avalanche network, so that basically what this means is that the transaction logic for processing transactions will use Bitcoin scripting language and UTXO architecture, so that anyone who has built an application that uses Bitcoins, like pay to script hash or whatever, will be able to take their applications and run it on this virtual machine using that logic. And so I think it's an incredibly powerful future where it allows for flexibility and new implementations to spring up, and doesn't necessarily lock us into this one view of the EVM that we have to stick with forever. It provides many more means of upgradability and changing and adapting into the future.
Amazing. Would you see other kinds of virtual machines being deployed on the Avalanche blockchain of blockchains? I mean, you have the UTXO, of course, you have the Bitcoin script and the UTXO-based blockchains, but what about something that's the wallet-based?
Yes, that's definitely something that's on our radar. the EVM is where we started with because that had the most adoption. Bitcoin is something that's super important to the world, and so I'm trying to bring that along as well. But yeah, WASM WebAssembly is definitely probably like the third most popular of those three, and then it's just going to be it's the blue sky. What comes next? Can we develop some new smart contract languages that are even better than what we have today with WASM and with Solidity? And also one cool thing about these subnets and Avalanche is you can actually control membership as well. So there's been this really harsh distinction between public blockchains and private blockchains. And you always, whenever you're building something before, you had to make this decision. Do I want this to be open to the entire world, or do I want this to just run this in my company? And we just have our own like local Ethereum version, or try to use Hyperledger or something. And one thing that our subnets will allow people to do is define exactly who is allowed to participate. And so you can be able to reuse our consensus infrastructure and reuse validator sets without necessarily granting membership to everyone. So you could make your subnet totally permissioned, or some subset for permission for some subset of people. You could try to filter out by citizenship or something. If you had if the U.S. government wanted to run something that's a special financial network that can only be operated by and used by U.S. citizens, they could set it up so that only U.S. citizens get to validate the network, or only citizens can actually transact. And so I think it's an incredibly powerful way to use different languages and different operating systems underneath, but also to have interesting membership requirements so that enterprise customers don't necessarily have to roll their own blockchain that they host on site if they want to participate in the space, and can instead kind of piggyback on top of our infrastructure.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to ask some very specific questions because you have a lot of expertise in this field, mostly for my own intellectual curiosity. Let's talk about bridging technology. Let's say you have a token with a fixed supply on Ethereum, which is a standard ERC20 contract, and then you want to have it available on BSC and the C chain, for example, maybe Phantom. Let's say 3 chains there. What would be your recommendation to get these chains, get the token available on these other chains, so that you can participate on a DEX like Pangolin, for example? What would be your recommendation there?
So this is one of the hardest problems with the multi-chain infrastructure ecosystem that we're talking about. So you're coming in with the hard questions early. Yeah, this is something that I don't think there's necessarily a super clear answer to, and this is just as part of we're still building out this field. So what I say today might be different 6 months from now. There's a few different options for bridging. Basically, the way bridging works most of the time is you lock a coin on one side, and then you burn it, or you lock it up so that it can't be used elsewhere, and then you mint a new token on the new chain that you're trying to migrate to. And so yeah, the subtlety here is, how do you know that the token that you're minting, the official version of the token, and if there's multiple bridges between Ethereum and Avalanche, how do you make sure that the 2 bridges are minting the same token? Or if they're minting a different token, how do you coalesce them so that you don't have 5 different copies of Tether or Link or whatever token you're trying to bring over? So this is actually, it's a really difficult problem that frequently ends up with multiple versions of the same token across these chains.
Also cycles, right? You can go from Ethereum to C chain to BSC to Ethereum.
Yeah. So there's a couple different options here, and it kind of depends who's participating. If it makes things easier if the original token issuer is participating in the ecosystem. If you have the Chainlink organization or like the Tether organization who can like mint an official Tether version, that can certainly help you and work with interoperability. So at the end of the day, what you need is an official version of the token on the new chain. And you can do things where you cap the supply on the new chain and burn all the supply that's on Ethereum, and then only mint the new supply, or you can kind of mint from zero. There's a couple options. I think the best approach is probably to have a wrapper contract that basically will let you convert from the bridged version to the official version. Because inevitably you can't really control who makes a bridge, and there will be multiple versions pop up. Another option would be to have liquidity pools on either side. So basically, there's you basically kind of copy the AMM architecture from Uniswap or Pangolin, and have an amount of liquidity on each side of the bridge that's swappable back and forth, and then kind of let the arbitrageurs balance it out for you, so that you can always move across chain at the right price. But it's a challenging question, and there really is no clear-cut answer. I think Andre Cronje put out his guide a month or two ago on the best way to deploy something multi-chain. But yeah, I think the biggest question is, is the original token issuer involved who can issue an official version of the token, or are you kind of doing this on their behalf? And it's harder if you're doing it on their behalf. So there's a lot of considerations there. That answer was probably very confusing if you haven't thought about this problem a whole lot. So apologies there.
So we have been thinking about this problem for a while because some technologies are taxable events, some technologies are not taxable events. So it's almost like a ETF where the rebalancing happens on the issuance side, which is not taxable, as opposed to you trying to rebalance it on your side by selling and buying assets, which are all taxable trades. So we have thought about this, and the answer. And it's something that I've been racking my brain, because people love to use Avalanche, people love to use Binance Smart Chain, all of these other chains. It's just that there's no prescriptive answer here per se, right? Everything case by case, which is where things become complicated.
Yeah, I will say, if you are deploying a bridge, make sure my one piece of advice that I may have learned from experience is make sure that you always are deploying contracts that have all of the functionality that you will need in them. Because I think especially for some of these like off-chain, tokens tokens that are redeemable for off-chain services like Chainlink, the graph, some of these things where you're kind of going to be paying for services eventually. Make sure you're always including all the functionality in your bridge tokens, and don't just use standard Open Zeppelin ERC20s without thinking through all the implications, because sometimes there are a lot of these tokens do have extra features bolted on, like for bidding or for signatures or things like that you might expect to have in the Link token, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a full session on just this bridging tokens for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm going to ask another more specific question, which is your area of expertise. So help me understand what's going on with Pangolin. So from my understanding, the contracts are the AMM contracts, Uniswap version 2, and which works pretty well. And then what has changed is the governance model is completely different. So can you please quantify or explain to our audience what that means, and how is it different from Uniswap?
Sure. So, first off, hats off to Uniswap. They're an incredible company, and they have developed really awesome AMM the whole world loves so much. And super congrats to them on the V3. Yeah, so we took our AMM contracts from Uniswap, and as far as the actual exchanging, the swapping infrastructure, basically identical. The only changes we really made were some naming conventions to switch from ETH to AVAX, Uni to PNG, Pangolin, kind of a thing. So the exchange contracts themselves are basically identical. But you're right, the governance model is very different. And really, the reason for that was we were looking at what the what attracts users to a DEX? And right now the answer is yields and yield farming. And Uniswap actually experimented with this themselves by running some liquidity mining pools that were incentivized with the Uni token, but those were only for a fixed period of time. And so one thing we saw is that when those pools expired, I think they lost a lot of liquidity. And I think that's one place where SushiSwap really shines, is that Sushi is really the masters of giving you 10 different ways to earn Sushi tokens for providing liquidity, giving you different offers every week to try out different pools, stake your tokens to earn additional rewards. And so we wanted to kind of combine some of the best of both worlds there. And so we liked the idea of the staking model, where you can basically, just for providing liquidity, you earn our liquidity token, or our governance token, excuse me. And so we kind of took the idea of Uniswap pools, or the Uniswap mining pools, and adapted them to our use. And so I had to write a bunch of contracts from scratch that were kind of used to distribute our tokens every day, so that we mint a certain amount of tokens every day. We cap supply, but it's distributed over 20 years. So we distribute a certain number of tokens per day to a group of different staking pools, broken up by how much liquidity is provided in each pool. And so I was able to borrow some contracts from Compound's governance protocol, which Uniswap uses as well. So there's some code from Compound in there. Synthetics, they all have a staking contract that I'm also using. And there's also some code of my own. So stealing from a few different sources there. Very grateful of you. And yeah, our code is open source as well, if anybody would like to try to adapt our model, and I'm totally supportive of that. And so yes, we actually had some interesting stuff happen in the last few weeks. One of the things that I think we realized we didn't do as well as we could have was changing up how the incentives were provided for different pools. And so we should have incentivized our PNG pools a bit more heavily than our non-PNG pools. For anybody who doesn't know, PNG is Pangolin's token. And so we actually had our first governance proposal just the last week or two, which was to make a change to our token staking contracts to add some functionality to let us change the weights of how these rewards were distributed. And so that proposal passed pretty close to unanimously. And so I was really proud of that. And it's currently in the time lock execution period right now, that all of our partners and all of the developers have time to make some changes to the code to account for the change. And then I think on Sunday night, Monday morning, we're going to flip over and switch to the new staking contract. So it's really exciting that we were able to have our first proposal, have it pass, and make some changes to make PNG and Pangolin better for the community.
So right now, the distribution of the PNG, I'm guessing PNG itself is on emission curve. There's an inflation curve that is being distributed to the pools, weighted by the liquidity. So the more contribution you have, the more PNG you earn, and obviously PNG has a market value, so there's an additional incentive to providing liquidity besides the fees that you get from the transactions. So
correct.
The rebalancing of the PNGs is what is going through the governance right now. Is that correct?
So what we're changing is the rate at which you earn PNG based on which pool you are in. So as it stands today, you earn the same amount of PNG for every $1 of liquidity that you enter. No matter which pool you're in. If the pool you're in is Avax ETH versus like Avax PNG, it doesn't matter. So the change that we've implemented is you're going to earn 3 times as much PNG per dollar of liquidity provided if you're in a PNG pool instead of an Avax pool. So this will mean that PNG holders will earn, 3x rewards per every dollar if you're in a PNG pool is the short summary.
Okay.
And we also added some. No, sorry.
Is there a reason for specifically picking up PNG?
Sorry, say that one more time.
Is there a specific reason for highlighting PNG?
Yeah, so basically it's just trying to tweak the tokenomics so that there's more incentive to hold PNG instead of just selling it for Avox ETH or whatever other token you have. For some people, they think since PNG is a newer token, it's riskier than some of the more established ones, and so there's a lot of people who wanted to counterbalance for being in a riskier token. They felt that they should get more rewards to kind of offset the riskiness, and we agreed. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so in the case of sushi, they have something called onsen, which is their incentivized pools, and they give you an additional sushi rate of emission for contributing liquidity. Now, why would people, would that not add additional selling pressure for sushi?
Sushi definitely, with all these liquidity tokens, there's a lot of selling pressure because you're yield farming these tokens, and a lot of people you think you're getting a risky token or whatever, so you want to convert it into a more stable token. And some of them have cap supplies, some of them mint infinitely. And I agree, the more these rewards you issue, the more selling pressure there is. So I think the real key is trying to make your token as useful as possible, making it incentivizing people to hold it. I think Sushi does a great job with that because they have in the Uniswap contract AMM contract world, there's something known as V-switch, which by default Uniswap and Pangolin and Sushi, they collect a 0.30% fee on every transaction. And if the fee switch is turned off, all of that fee goes to liquidity providers. One thing that Sushi does that's really neat is they divert 0.05% of that fee. So it's a 25-5 split. That 0.05% of the fee goes to Sushi holders. So there's additional token incentives to holding Sushi, and we're trying to make sure that. So that's a really good idea. Also, having governance be something that is very active and very useful is another really key piece of making sure that your token has value and it has practical applications.
Amazing. Okay, and then let's talk about what's coming down the pipe. What is something exciting that you're working on? So obviously Pangolin is massive. It's a huge success. Probably the biggest DApp on Avalanche. Is that right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So what else are you working on? What's coming in the pipe? What can you share with us?
Oh, I would love to tell you so much here, but I will just say I'm very excited. We have a number of applications coming in the next couple of months that I think are really going to shake up the ecosystem. I would say, generally speaking, we're concerned with trying to make sure that we're adding any of the DeFi primitives as we can, and trying to make sure that all of the building blocks are in place so that no one comes over to Avalanche and is like, well, where's this one application that's really important? So we're trying to make sure that we have all the building blocks. I think that's a major strategy. I think one thing we've also seen in the last few months is the NFT space is really exploding on Avalanche as well. And we've had several kind of viral projects launch on Avalanche. We had something called Crypto Seals. We had another one called Snowies. We had another one that was like a secret agent Avalanche project, Avox Stars maybe. So I think seeing all the success of all of those creators launching their NFTs on Avalanche for a fraction of the fees of Ethereum and having total success, totally selling out, and having some viral success is really cool. So I imagine we're going to see some more stuff in the NFT space in the future. I can't drop any specifics about any individual projects, but there is a lot in the pipeline right now. And in addition to the application side, we are just constantly working on our core infrastructure. We've kind of made a little bit of a strategic shift, and we were originally planning on dumping all of our kind of new features in one gargantuan release, but now we're kind of changing our strategy a little bit to kind of bring smaller chunks faster. So there's a lot of feature upgrades, helping with stability, scalability, and feature improvements coming in the next few months as well. Our core platform team pushes out updates incredibly quickly. Honestly, it's like at least once a week most of the time. So you always have to be updating your client. Pros and cons there.
Amazing. Okay, let's talk about another question, which is very specific to your role. A lot of these clones of Uniswap use the subgraph and the dashboards, the analytics dashboard that the Uniswap team has built. So you can see that with Pancake, you can see that with SushiSwap, and so on. But the challenge there is that these newer blockchains with faster block times and heavier transaction throughput, the subgraph has trouble keeping up. This is why you see Pancake Swap has been broken for a while. Do you face that problem with the Pangolin analytics tool? And if so, what are you doing to address it?
Yeah, so if you ask the Pangolin Telegram community, they will definitely tell you we've had performance issues on our analytics page, because we also do use the SAC backend. So yeah, that's been a challenge for us, just trying to make sure that we have the right infrastructure set up. And so we have been hosting that infrastructure ourselves, because the graph had not integrated Avalanche up until about a week ago. And so we were hosting our own implementation of their service, and we just kind of had constant database upgrades and re-architecting some of this. So that was a real challenge for us, and our DevOps team did a really good job there. And it's a bit of a difficult process, since you have to be careful with how you migrate and make sure that you don't try to not have to re-index publicly, because that can take a day or sometimes 4 days to re-index your data, and that can make it unavailable to the community to use. And so we recently migrated to the Graphs infrastructure. They recently integrated with us, so we're running our new subgraph on their hosted infrastructure. And so that's been working well for us so far. But yeah, during high peaks of activity, it's certainly been a problem, and something that we are really interested in how that affects us going forward, because we don't quite have the same level of traffic as Binance, but we'd certainly like to one day, and we certainly think we know that we can support it. And so it's a real challenge, and it's not something that has a quick answer, and that's something that I should be asking you that question. How is Covalent going to handle that for these changes? Because you've integrated Avalanche, and what are the challenges that you see, and the potential solutions that you see in handling those high throughput use cases?
Yeah, so our founding team are really database engineers. We've cut our teeth on CouchDB. My other co-founder worked on CouchDB. I've worked on Elasticsearch, on Hadoop, on Redshift, on BigQuery, so mostly analytical bases. So tons of experience on the founding team. So it comes down to this. It's a difference in philosophy. So what the graph does is they follow a paradigm called ETL. So you extract from a data source through Web3, transform using that subgraph, and then you load it into a data store, and then you query that data store with GraphQL. So that's their stack. The Covalent philosophy is inside out. So we do ELT. So we extract from a data source, load it into a database directly. So every single block, every single transaction, every single log event, and then transformation is done at query time. So we have a MongoDB clone of the query language, is of course built in-house, that we've retrofitted on top of this Postgres database. And so now you can run MongoDB filtering, query aggregations. You can't do aggregations with GraphQL, but with MongoDB, the aggregation pipeline, you can do aggregates on top of the log events or the transactions or whatever endpoint that you want. So that is really our philosophy. So think about this from a first principles approach from the ground up. We know exactly what the bottlenecks are. So first thing is that let's talk like bottom up, right? So first thing that break is get, which is what all of these blockchains use. The RPC layer is single threaded, and it cannot keep up with the Web3 calls if your node is syncing, because all of it is single threaded. And so you can't make Web3 calls, heavy Web3 calls, if your node is operational. So which means you need to install it. You need to yeah. And so what we've done is we've rewritten that entire layer to export the RLP files as batches directly, of getting that level DB, exposing it through RPC, and so on. It also solves another problem where the RPC, the JSON RPC, is a point query interface. So you can ask for it for one block, one storage slot, one log event, nothing that is batch size. So that's the first thing that we've solved. On the database side, basically we've rebuilt the storage layer so that you're able to update the database in transactions. So you have these batches of updates, and they're all as partitions, and everything is ACID compliant. So that's what we've done on the back end of our Postgres database. So we don't really have a transformation step in between. So there's no need to query Web3. We just like export all of the data. And this is why some of the endpoints, for example, get me a list of ERC20 balances in your wallet, is a question that only Covalent can answer today in the space, because you need an index of every single ERC20 contract and then figure out if you have a non-zero balance or even a zero balance, because you probably had a non-zero balance in the past, and especially for the taxation use cases, that's actually pretty important. So we're able to now scan the entire blockchain in sub-second response times. And then on top of that, you have the MongoDB aggregation. We're calling this language primer, and you can filter, sort, aggregate, whatever you want. So if you want the historical liquidity of a Pangolin pool, then all you have to do is look at the mint minus the events and do an aggregation there per day, per week, whatever it is. But all of that is done at query time rather than writing the subgraph, and rather than trying to sync it, rather than all of these other complications. The world is moving too fast. There's no time to invest in writing a sub or waiting for a couple of days for it to sync. So that is our approach. And it's worked very well. You know, if you look at like our 100+ customers today, they're all very happy with the approach that we've taken. And so now so that's how we're scaling Covalent, by rethinking the problem. So we don't use anything off the shelf. I mean, it's taken us a while to build this. We've been around for like 3.5 years. But yeah, so like every single piece in that entire data pipeline has been tweaked. And this is why any EVM-based chain, if you look at Avalanche, it took us 2 days to index the entire chain. And then from there on, we're able to keep up no problem, because we don't use anything, we don't do any extra work that is not necessary. And the cool thing about doing the projections and the transformation at query time is that this can be pushed to the edge. So you can actually scale out the transformation, as opposed to the subgraphs being single threaded and have to run on each event trigger, which is just not like your ON operations or even ON squared operations, rather than being a constant time ingestion pipeline. So that's really the difference in like how we're going to scale on how we are scaling Covalent.
That really excites me. Just listening to you talk about that was very cool. Yeah, I had the exact same thought about pushing all those computations out to the edge. I was just like, oh yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Today, PancakeSwap this morning, like 2 hours ago, announced that they have a bounty for $150,000 to build a new analytics engine to replace the subgraph. And so we're in direct contact with that team, and I basically like whipped out a couple of like SQL statements, number of pairs created, what is the liquidity per pair, all of that in like even before I had my first coffee, right? And because all of our queries run like in sub-second response times, because the whole thing has been tweaked for this kind of like scanning. So yeah, so that's basically what's going on with Covalent.
Yeah, that is really cool, because the data is so key, because like you said, just going to Geth is terrible, and just the way these smart contracts are designed, most of them are not designed to hold historical data, which, you know, it's maybe an oversight of the EVM. I don't know all the design decisions there, but it's very hard just even in Solidity to say what was, you know, you can't really say what was my balance in 10 blocks ago or something like that. And so you need all these data languages, and honestly, nobody knows Solidity either. So when you're working with front-end developers, when you're working with back-end developers too, you need, say, like, we need to get, they're not going to know how to query Solidity and use like Ether's JS or whatever. Like, they need to know, can we get it in SQL? Can we get it in GraphQL? Can we get it in a REST API? And getting those transformations are really key to making sure that you can actually build your entire application and not just the smart contract side, because no one interfaces with smart contracts directly that isn't like a huge Solidity developer. You know, occasionally, you know, I will have to do some things through an Explorer interface or whatever, but at the end of the day, all these integrations, they're coming back to a web application. They're coming back to even maybe a C++ desktop application or whatever, and you need those more robust layers that are more traditional to actually build those, because we just don't have those. We need the bridges from the Web3 applications to the Web2.
It's why we called our company Covalent, because covalent bonds in chemistry, if you remember your high school chemistry, you're binding databases and blockchains, or the decentralized future with the current centralized systems, however you want to play that analogy. Okay, we're almost up on time, so I want to ask you, what are, you know, some tools and some document resources that you can point to that may be helpful for someone starting out with the Avalanche ecosystem?
Sure. So one of my personal goals with Avalanche is I want Avalanche to be the best place to develop smart contracts and the easiest place to develop smart contracts. And so one of my projects that I do on the side is I've been working on a quick start repository on Git to help you write your smart contracts as fast as possible. So you can search it on GitHub. It's under the Avalabs organization. We have a repo called Avalanche Smart Contract Quick Start, which basically is a Git repo that is integrated with Hardhat, which is my favorite environment. I think it's significantly better than Truffle and Remix, like by a long shot. And I've set up all of the configuration files for you already. I've imported OpenZeppelin, so you can literally deploy a token in like three lines of command line.
Nice.
Command line commands. So you can just clone this repo. It's released under a totally permissive license, so like, no worry about having to attribute anything to us. So you can just go in. There's already a contracts folder. There's already a contract that is deploying a ERC20 token. So you can go in, you can set the supply you want, you can make your Connor coin and deploy it right away. So that is just me trying to make it as easy as possible, so you don't have to worry about setting up any configs. It's already pointed at our API nodes. All the fees are set up correctly. If you want to deploy on mainnet or Fuji, you're going to have to add a private key, which you'll have to fund, but we have Faucet for developers so they can fund their Fuji address. With the Hardhat network, you can also, it'll run a local copy of the blockchain on your laptop. So if you're just testing or you want to write some unit tests or just mess around, you can do that right away. You don't have to enter any private keys. It's just ready to go. So I think that's, if people are looking to get start developing on Avalanche, check out the Quick Start repo. That's the best place. Also, feel free to message me on Discord in the Avalanche or the Pangolin room. I get a lot of people asking me, like, what's the best way to start? Will you be my mentor? Whatever. And so I try to give people advice. I think Hardhat is the best place to do development. It has debugging interface by far. And that's really good. I would also say if you're looking for a first project or like how to learn Solidity in the first place, if you're not an Ethereum developer, try to deploy your first token. I think that's the best thing you can do is like, I personally, I like the Solidity language documentation that the Ethereum Foundation has provided. I was able to learn a lot from that. There's a lot of tutorials out there. All of the stuff you can learn about Ethereum also applies to Avalanche. The tip I will give is check the date on everything, because especially with Solidity, there's a lot of breaking changes from version to version. And just if you find some tutorials for like version 4, don't look at those. You look for somebody that's like version 6, version 7, version 8, preferably from the last year. And try to deploy your first token, try to deploy your first NFT. And then once you do that, you'll like learn the ropes, and that's the equivalent of a hello world application in the blockchain space right now. And then you can learn how to build on top of that. The one thing I will say, that there's one difference between Avalanche and Ethereum when it comes to developing, and this is an important one. Blocks are issued at an irregular rate in Avalanche. So in Ethereum, their blocks are issued at approximately like every 15 seconds or so. And so a lot of people will use the block number as a proxy for time. On Avalanche, you have to use the block time rather than the block number, because blocks can be issued as frequently as possible as there are transactions. So that's the only difference you have to know. So if you're coming over from Ethereum, there's one thing you have to account for. But other than that, you're good. All the same tutorials and stuff will apply.
Amazing. So it's almost like a React starter app. If you're familiar with the React ecosystem, it's almost like that. Very cool. One final question. What's going on at Avalabs? How are you guys able to attract such great, passionate people to the team? Had a chat with Gab last week, and the passion was infectious. Like I was telling my team, everyone had to watch that show. And it's convinced us that we need to work harder and we need to contribute more to the entire. No, honestly, I'm just being honest here, right? So how do you guys run your shop there? Like this, I've never seen a team that's more passionate, like mission focused team, right? A lot of people are there to ship code and all that stuff, but really caring about putting things together and contributing back. Like what is the secret here? I'd love to hear that.
Oh, well, if I told you, it wouldn't be a secret anymore. I think really what it is we all believe what we're doing can change the world. And for people that work in the technical space and can really understand what the differences between different blockchains are and what the trade-offs people make, they understand that Avalanche is for real, and that we're not just a fork. We're not just taking an old idea. We actually have fundamental breakthroughs that are behind us, and so we have just this power of knowing that we've really already accomplished something truly great, and this is just a moment for us where we can have a real impact on the space and on global finance going forward, and just this whole Web3 world that is going to change so many people's lives. It's very rare that you get to have that impact. A lot of people say that, like, oh, our company is going to change the world, but I think it's rare for that to actually be the case. And I think at Avalabs, we actually have that opportunity, and that's really cool to think about. And just like all the work that we get to do is incredibly high impact, and everything you do is just like, when is it getting pushed to production? Because we did it yesterday. It's a really exciting opportunity. And speaking of, if anybody else is feeling inspired, we are hiring for basically every position at the company. We are trying to radically expand because there is far more work to do we have time for right now. And so if anybody is interested, I think avalabs.org/careers, every role from different engineering roles for platform team, for smart contracts, to marketing, to business, to community management. Like, we want the best people, and no matter where they're working in the spectrum, and everybody in the community is welcome. And we're really excited, especially minorities, people of color. When we're very interested in bringing everybody on and making our company an inclusive space.
Amazing. Okay, do you have any questions for our community, for Covalent, for me? This is your chance.
I have to say, talking about, you got me really excited with your little pitch about what you do differently, and I'm excited. I'm starting to use some of the Covalent API for some work I'm doing that I can't really talk a ton about right now, but I think I'm excited to use it even more now, and so I think you've got some really great plans and really great strategy on the back end for the scalability stuff. That is going to be a huge problem of just in general in the ecosystem. Most of this tooling, most of all of the work around the core platforms is very focused on the assumptions that Bitcoin and Ethereum make. And now that we have platforms that are violating those assumptions, how does that break everything else? And so, like I said, yeah, when you have availability, what's going to change? And I think it sounds like data might be in good hands.
We hope so. There's a lot going on. Like, for example, another really cool thing, which is a side effect. So we've been building rainbow tables for decoding event logs on our side. And what we found is that when you go to multi-chain, there's no ether scan for a lot of these newer ecosystems. There's no ether scan for the Avalanche C chain. There's no ether scan for, like, I think there is something for BSC, but Phantom, for example, probably doesn't have one. So we're actually able to decode those event logs without having the ABI, because a lot of the ABIs are just the same way the ABI, the topic hashes are calculated on Ethereum. So that's another really cool feature we're able to offer. Another really, like, as things get more and more complicated, the number of solutions and the problem space just gets that much richer. Another thing is, for example, we're able to map token prices between Ethereum mainnet and Avalanche. So that's part of the offering, and so you're able to now map prices and have Pangolin, base pairs and LP token prices and all that stuff. Right? There's just so much. I don't think we even scratched the surface of what's possible. And I think that the challenge is, like, keeping up with the space is almost impossible at this stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One day I'll be able to take my vacation, but anytime soon, sadly. I guess one question I have. Oh, yeah. One more. So I guess one thing that I've seen a lot with the graph that I'm just curious about what your thoughts are on is, I think you've taken a very different approach. You said you have these rainbow tables. You're able to kind of replicate. A lot of contracts are the same, or they emit the same events. So you're able to, when people deploy new apps, you're able to very quickly determine what kind of outputs they are and index them quickly. But I guess one question where I'm wondering if the graph has you beat, or I'm curious what your response is. Like, the thing that the graph is really good at is creating a custom database, like, for your app, and getting to know all of the, like, none of the calls are generic. For you're able to get queries that are very tuned to your application. So I guess, how do you intend to respond to when we drop this new dApp that nobody's ever seen before, that's only possible on Avalanche, that your queries aren't necessarily super suited for? Like, what is your plan to respond to that application? Because is it going to be on the developer? Is there going to be tools in the future to kind of help craft what that schema should be for this application? Or is that something where your team would work on trying to figure out?
So this is actually a three-part question. So it's great that you asked this as the final question. So the first thing is that we have something called the Class A endpoints, which are generic endpoints. So it doesn't matter what contract you put in, you can pull out the log events ASAP, right? Within 2 blocks. That's our latency. So it doesn't matter. So you may not be able to decode the ABI, but we have a feature where you can upload ABIs on our dashboard that's coming. But the minimum is you can pull out the topic hashes and the undecoded data, regardless of what contract it is, right? So we index every single contract, every single balance, every single token, every single log event. So that is the first answer. The second answer is that we have an experimental project right now to export the contract as well. So we have a re-implementation of the EVM that is able to hold on to the entire state as a JSON document for every storage right. So what we have is now ask at any point in time, what is the backing database of that contract as a JSON document? And then once you have a time series of this, then you can do any kind of aggregated query or sampling or whatever you want to call it. So that is the second thing that's coming out. Of course, it's very, very expensive to run this, and this is why we're
absolutely.
But having access to the storage itself is huge because you don't have to piece together stuff from events or do get storage add and poke at the contract or add special getters to your contract so you can or view functions to peek at the thing. You just have that entire database. Literally, it's a database behind every contract. So that's the second thing that's coming up. The third is that we're going to build a marketplace. So the whole point of creating Primer and then making the data models richer with the contract state is now you can build any kind of aggregation, filter, whatever you want, and save it as a brand new endpoint. So our Class A endpoints are generic across all blockchains. So it gives you like log events, transactions, balances, token IDs, the NFT, and so on. That's supported across all blockchains. The Class B endpoints are specific to a dApp on a blockchain. So it would be Uniswap on Ethereum. It could be Pangolin on Avalanche. It could be Pancake Swap on BSC. It could be Sushi Swap, which is supported across like 5 or 6 different blockchains, right? So those are the Class B endpoints, and that's maintained by Covalent. The Class C endpoints, which is still being built, is the marketplace. So now you can go in and create a query that's crafted exactly for your brand new dApp. So which includes the log events, includes the transactions, includes the storage, all pass through Primer, which is our transformation engine. And then you save that as a brand new endpoint. And then you list it on our app store. And so now anyone can go in and browse through all the endpoints. And of course, all the endpoints return data. The MongoDB thing, you can rename columns as well. You can put it in whatever format you want. And we have a way to denormalize these rich JSON objects into CSV through the API directly. And so you can plug it into Excel. So that is our strategy to answer the long tail of endpoints that we can never, ever support ourselves in-house. It doesn't make sense. And so that is our plan. And that's why we've rebuilt the Primer query language, because the raw data is too rich, not customized enough. You want to be able to rename things, you want to project, you want to filter, you want to sort, you want to aggregate. So we have some sample endpoints where you can get the historical interest rates of one of the lendings from Aave, for example, without writing a single line of code, right? We can get a AMM pricing because the pools act as an oracle. So you can get the pricing engine from that, from any pool as an endpoint. And so you can then further aggregate that per day or per week, whatever it is. So the whole analytics dashboard that you have, we can actually support all of those features without writing a subgraph, all through the API, because all the data is available. So that's really the strategy there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it sounds incredible. I feel like I need to be using some of your guys' data even more. So I'm really excited about the future of that and the present. The present's already pretty darn good.
Yeah, amazing, Connor. Okay, it's a pleasure to speak with you, and thank you so much for your generosity in sharing your knowledge and your expertise with the community. This call and this video will be on YouTube, and we'll share it through our social after. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a real pleasure. Thank you so much, Ganesh.
Take care. Bye.
All right, bye.